Welcome to the next episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast. Join Jerry, Nick, and me, John, for a compelling dive into the realms of sex, sexuality, and sensuality within the gay community. This discussion uncovers the intimate nuances and societal pressures gay men face, framed around the intriguing concept of sexual magic as a tool for healing and connection. Expect a raw and vulnerable exploration, complete with adult language and mature themes, as we tackle the impact of social media, the role of pornography, and the power of open conversations. Ready for an insightful journey? Let's begin.
All right, so for today's discussion,
Yes.
we have known that this discussion was going to happen for a while. Mm-hmm. And last week we talked to Ruben, who brought up the subject of sexuality, sensuality, and relationship to energetics and medicine work. Mm-hmm. And I think the topic that we've wanted to talk about and have maybe had some anxiety or some feelings about has been around issues around sexuality. Mm-hmm. And so I know after Ruben talked, what I was left with was this need or this possibility to talk about sensuality. And so when I was thinking about this session today, I thought we should probably do a trigger warning for viewers that this won't be our only conversation about this topic. Right. But I do think we're going to end up talking about sensuality, sexuality in a gay context. And I know in order for me to be able to do that, I don't want to feel like I have to censor myself or my language. And so maybe I'm the only trigger warning for today, but I just think it's fair to let viewers know we're going to dive into this conversation around sexuality.
Yeah, and I think it's an important one. When you bring up an interesting, not issue, but just I think a piece of this kind of discussion. I know there's been at least for me, I know there's been a little bit of nervousness around wanting to talk about it. I mean, I want to talk about it, but I am nervous about it. It's like, well, what do I say? And am I going to reveal too much? Or will I feel some of the things that that have been a struggle for me, like feeling ashamed or embarrassed or, just across the spectrum when we talk about sex and sexuality and expression of that. So I wanted to put that on the table, and as I was preparing for this conversation, I was like, you know what, just allow any and all of that to happen. If I have the feelings and if I have the nervousness and the anxiety, just acknowledge that. Just acknowledge that, because I think that's what makes this a really real conversation.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I think, I have a different, maybe way in which I'm approaching it. Maybe not so much apprehensive as you kind of said, John, about putting it all out there. I've already put it all out there. I've been putting it out there for quite a while now. So in terms of what I'm not necessarily apprehensive about having this conversation. I think that what I will bring to it might be different than perhaps what you both will. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just because of my time with porn. I mean, it's been 15 years now. Mm-hmm. I've been sharing that aspect of my life for quite a while now. So I think maybe I'm in a different place. I'm not saying it's a better one. And in fact, I think I have some different issues to work out maybe in this conversation. But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, good. Thanks. Where do we begin?
Well, I think here's what happened for me when we were talking to Ruben. I'm also reading a book right now called Pleasure Activism. And it's written by a black trans guy who seems to fluctuate in their sharing between masculine identified and really embracing like their feminine parts. Right. I don't know how else to say that. It's incredibly enlightening because this person is very poetically talking about their body and their relationship with their body and relationship to pleasure in a way that is incredibly refreshing. I mean, it's a very kind of an academically driven book. She's an academic, but she is sharing this aspect of her sensuality. They are sharing this aspect of their sensuality in a really powerful way. And I'm comparing it to the conversation we had with Ruben, which is pretty consistent with the conversations that I've had with other Indigenous teachers and elders about the energetics and tapping into, I want to say, sensuality in relationship to sexuality that becomes this manifestation of energy or power or medicine. And I think there was a conversation with Ruben when I texted you guys and said, because I'm having anxiety about this conversation too, because I don't even know why, but there was something about what Ruben said that gave permission to say, okay, let's talk about like why are we even having the kind of feelings that we're having about this conversation?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could probably spend a whole hour talking about that.
We really could, because we just listening to what Ruben was talking about in our last episode. I really identify with that, especially in my more mature years and where I am now. And it makes a lot of sense as far as the medicine and the healing qualities and the empowerment around sensuality and even the expression of sexuality. And I feel like that's where I am now with it. But but there's a backstory, and my backstory is I'm a gay man, and there was and is a perception about gay sex and what that's all about, and what you do is wrong, and so that's still a part of my backstory, and a fear around even talking about that because of being ostracized and cast out and damned on and all of that. That's still there, even though I think I've progressed in my awareness around the expression of sexuality, especially gay sex. So I think that's where my nervousness is. It's the backstory stuff, and maybe people might identify with that. That's where they are now, just with shame around, you know, their sex, their sexuality, there's maybe even being gay or trying to identify as that. You know, the it's a pretty broad spectrum, I think, but that's where my nervousness is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have a different situation in that, you know, I've been with my partner sharing our sex lives, you know, either, well, online now for, you know, like I said, upwards of 15 years. And it has been, among other things, it's been a very successful business for us. And with that, we've drawn a very big audience, and that audience has supported us and cheered us on and said, yes, this is good, and given us thumbs up and given us money and given us, you know, encouragement. Mm-hmm. And so hearing what you're saying, definitely, I knew that place. Mm-hmm. I definitely knew that place. I was raised to know that place, mm-hmm. and to be ashamed of any thought about being gay. And what I found through putting ourselves out there like we did is a community that actually celebrates it. Mm-hmm. Maybe in terms of roles of sex and what's portrayed, maybe that isn't so accurate as in terms of who I am personally. And so in some ways I don't fully connect or identify with that persona, that porn persona, because it's not entirely me. Mm-hmm. And the trouble that I also have is that because people have been watching that for so long, mm-hmm. now if we are to go into a hookup or whatever, I mean, there's just tons of assumption already of exactly what's going to happen. And for me to try to approach an individual to have sex outside of that persona is impossible. It's not possible.
Because they see that online persona.
Precisely.
And that's who they think they know.
Exactly. And moreover, what they often do is project what they think I would be like, what they would be like if they were me, type of thing. Right. And that it's hard. It's hard for me to approach a random hookup, without thinking I have to be a porn star. Because I'm pretty sure more often than not, the individual's already expressed they've been a fan for years, they've been watching me since the 13 or whatever, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's pressure because it's like, well, all right, then that's clearly what's expected, and now I have to decide if I want to provide that or I wanted something different in this interaction. Mm-hmm. So I'm grateful that I'm not stuck in that place of shame so much, but boy, I'm definitely stuck in something different sometimes. And it's I don't know. I'm not asking for sympathy, nothing like that. It's just it's a dilemma that I didn't anticipate. It doesn't feel as bad as thinking, of being ashamed of my sex so much. It's just that I have a lot of people out there with expectations of what I'm to be sexually.
Right.
And that's a hard one. I don't know. It's just kind of a hard one to contend with.
I'm having two reactions. I think there's a part of me that, as I'm hearing that makes me a little sad, and maybe not sad for you, maybe for you, in the sense of you're having gotten to know you, and like in these podcasts and the stuff that we've done, like you're just so profoundly more than that persona. I mean, I'm thoroughly impressed with you as an individual and as a trainer, as a coach, as a friend. We'll see how you do at the Grand Canyon. But just these heart places that I feel like we have shared, I'm just like wow, it saddens me a little bit that people make this assumption when there's just so much more to you.
Well, thank you.
And then there's this other piece, and I think it's tapping into maybe why I feel a little anxious, and it's around the issue of expectations.
Yes.
Right? So I'm hearing you say...
We talked about this before. Yeah, keep
yeah,
going.
there are these expectations that you're going to show up and be whoever you're going to be, like you are in your films. And I think... I'm thinking about the expectations on me and how quickly that influences my sense of whether I'm desirable or not, or measure up, or show up in a way that is acceptable. And I think one of the challenges in our hookup culture, which is very quick and fast, is it doesn't allow for a lot of negotiating.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it just becomes this really kind of quick experience, and I think that's why people feel kind of empty afterwards, because that's what I hear from a lot of clients saying, that just, clients who come and see me for therapy, I should say. Yeah. But when clients will come in, they'll talk about, I'm so tired of the apps.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is because they know they're not being seen. They're being objectified.
Yes.
But wait, if I can say one thing, because this is, I remember talking with you about this months ago, and this issue came up, and my kind of response to you, and I think it is a benefit of the app, and we've talked about this before because I know you use the app in this way. It's you do have an opportunity through the way that you parlay with someone to get to a deeper place, to a more tangible understanding of the human being you're talking with. But when we're doing it in terms of negotiating sex acts, it requires a lot of confidence in yourself as you're negotiating, like being clear, like, here's what I'm looking to do. This is what this is what I'm open to doing. These are the things I'm really into. How about you? And then we talk and we negotiate. And so I think in some ways, that's why I remember this talk with you. And I remember saying, well, why not negotiate everything beforehand? Like, why not just have it all written out clear, the expectation, so that could quell perhaps the anxieties around the act and around getting together, because you both have a much clearer understanding of what's going to happen. And I think in my opinion, that's a benefit of these apps. It's hard to find them sometimes, but I think that one in particular, it's not, going to the Fens. I'm thinking about Fenway in Boston, like the hookup places where people just go into the field and just randomly have sex, and there's no conversation. It's a quick get up, get out, jump in a cab and leave and forget about it, type of thing. It just happens and it's done. And now, we're in a different situation where these apps do allow you to showcase the goods through your albums and videos, and then you have an opportunity to have conversation about exactly what's going to happen. But I don't know. But there again, I'll say for me personally, it's kind of tough because I've got a website and I've got over 800 videos at this point that show examples of I guess what to expect. And so in these conversations, it's I don't know. I more often than not have conversations about hooking up, about no, it's we're not going to get into anal, let's just have oral sex type of thing. And then oftentimes I just find it always ends up that I end up fucking the dude, because that's just kind of what I guess that's a program that I know how to run. I guess it's a way to avoid anxiety in the moment and just go, well, I know this, I know what to do now, because I've done it 800 times or whatever. And so it's there, I guess, in a sense, of magic, or I was telling you the other day, like I'm getting more enjoyment, I'm feeling it more in my body when I'm flirting with someone in person at the gym. It's just so much more like, oh, that was hot, that was awesome, I'm gonna think about it for days, I'll probably jerk off about it later, who knows. But it's not hardcore pornography that I'm just watching being like, I'll take 2 of those and maybe half of that, and if I've got something left over, we can do, you know what I mean? And so it's just it's I don't know, it's a return to being more human in the act, I think. But at the same time, I still think it's important for people that are maybe dealing with some anxiety, that want to get sexually active. I think you can find great people on the apps and have those types of conversations that set up expectations, and I think it can lead to good things. But you've got to have the confidence, I guess, first, to have those conversations, and maybe it's hard for some people.
Yeah, I think you really hit something, and it's really, I think, like you said, about the pros, I think, of the apps, because you do have an opportunity. You can post pictures, maybe videos, you put your profile, and you can write as little or as much as you want about yourself and what you like and what you're into. And then someone could actually read that. And so in a way, using air quotes, the dialogue has begun, because I can see, oh, this person's into this, I'm into that, we can engage. And I think it can potentially go further, like you said, having that human, experience, rather than, well, not rather than, but in addition to just hooking up and we're going to do the deed, let's have a conversation, talk, even though it's through this app. I think there's sometimes a missed opportunity, especially if you're wanting to connect on that level. And we just happen to have this avenue of these apps, and often hookup apps, to make these connections. What I not struggle with, but what comes to mind is when we talk about expectation, and even of self or even of the other person that we might be hooking up with, the word that pops into my head is performance. It's like you've got to be this performer almost, and it does, in a way, it takes away from your authenticity. It's like I've got to put on this mask and this costume and this uniform, so to speak. I have to be this in order to show up in this situation. Sure. I've got to perform. I've got to show that I've got, I got a big dick, and I've got to show that I am the top that I say that I am. It's, all those things. When you really just want to cuddle, right? But you can't show that or say that
Right.
for some reason.
Right.
Right.
Or moreover, I mean, just to propose, you know what, why don't we just hang out and see where it goes? I mean, that would be so nice. You know, who knows? Maybe anything, who knows? But why can't we just hang out, make sure the chemistry's there, type, you know, these types of things. And often, I mean, I know there's a couple people that I just had to block because it was just too like they were just not about that. There was no personality. There was nothing coming through. It was all pics and fucking, and it just, I don't know. I just am so not. I guess maybe that person through seeing pornography thinks that that's, but it's just so not what I'm about. I agree. It is the thing about expectations, but that's what I was talking about in that you have an opportunity to say, well, you know, if I'm not fully comfortable with the situation, my dick doesn't work. And that's hard to say, but I'll tell you with the experience that I have under my belt, it's I'm totally fine saying it in that, and when, you know, more, I think it lets the other individual know that, you know, the expectation is, you know, if I'm turned on enough, then that stuff might happen, and, you know, there's a possibility that it won't, but it definitely frees me in the sense of not, you know, a porn edit is a glorious thing. Right? Right? I mean, if you saw what really happened in a porn scene, I don't know that so many people would be like wanting to, you know, jump in on that, because it's very different than what ends up, you know, being preserved in the video. And I guess the conversations maybe that I have with people are more about the reality of actually having sex as opposed to what they see me doing in videos.
Can I jump on that for a minute? And I'm just going to put it out there. We can edit this out if it gets too crazy. But when I work with clients, especially clients coming out of the closet, or maybe it's someone who I'm sitting listening to this conversation, and I have like these two beautiful specimens of men, right? But a lot of guys show up and maybe they're just kind of average in their body or average in how they look and how they present in the world. And I would say a lot of men, I can't begin to tell you how many clients I have come into my office who believe their education around their sexuality as gay men has been porn. Yeah. Yes. And my body's not like that. My dick is not like that. Right. I can't take a dick like that. Right? Like, they're looking at this material. And it's interesting how many times I've talked to clients who I've said, look, you know, I know people in the industry, and I can promise you that what you're seeing on the film is not how it always shows up. And that 4-hour hard-on probably lasted 20 minutes, but it looks like 4 hours on the video, right? But people, I think there are a lot of people who get, that's their material of looking at their own sense of acceptability.
Absolutely.
And these guys on the videos, I mean, I've yet to have a pizza delivery guy drop his pants.
Why doesn't that happen?
Even when I put the tip on the ground, nothing happens.
no matter how many times I call the plumber over.
Right. Exactly.
It's just not like that.
And so I guess I'm wondering, how do we speak to those folks who are, and even though I consciously know that, I also know that subconsciously, in those moments, and when I'm on that app, or if I'm wanting to talk with someone, there's this part of me saying, am I going to show up in the way that they're expecting me to show up, which I imagine to be how it happens on the videos.
It's tough because I think there's a responsibility on the individual, and it's really hard because, no pun intended, where we are in this world being gay people, and it's still very controversial. It's still, perchance, if the wrong person gets elected, those rights could be at threat. I've heard conversations about this, and so it's hard to understand your place in the world, and so you're going to look at examples that are out there. But what I'm getting at is I think the individual has a responsibility with a dosage of that type of stuff, and that's hard to say, but I think that there's a point at which it becomes unhealthy to continually expose yourself to those things when you're trying to understand your own sexuality. The other day, I started subscribing to one of these AI brawny men things because they're just hot as hell. Like they just keep coming up. But I started showing them to John, and we were talking about it, and he's like, that's going to ruin you because it's going to give you the expectation that everyone is ginormously horse hung and perfect hairy bodies with the pecs and the smiles and the jawlines and the bullshit. And he's right. I was looking at it because it was hot, and I like, before I train as pre-workout, I usually look at porn. I just always have. I don't know why, but I like it. It gets things going. It gets me motivated. But I realize I have to stop doing that because I'm fucking myself up because I don't look like that. And I don't want to burn into my brain that that's what everyone out there wants because I can never live up to something like that.
Let me interject because I totally agree with what you're saying. We want to give the responsibility to the individual to, to either speak up or broaden their perspective on things. But kind of related to what you experienced, a person came to you after having listened to our podcast and said, wow, you're talking about things I didn't know that I could even ask, or even I didn't know that there was even a conversation around queer spirit, etc. And I think there could be the same thing said here. It's like, well, what if that's all you know?
Yeah.
I mean, if gay sex through porn is all you know, you don't know anything beyond that, how then can we expect that individual to think differently and do differently if that's all you know? That's the lane that they're in. And if they feel like they can't achieve and check all those boxes, well, then I failed.
But you just said it. It's conversation within our community that needs to happen about this.
Yeah.
Because you are entirely right. Like it scares me sometimes because we continue to get messages from people that are they're in their 30s now or 20s now, but they were watching us at teen years, and this happens, of course, because in a hetero place, when you have a mother and father and they're happy to be raising you to marry a woman someday, there's a lot of conversation and example and encouragement of that sexuality and those acts and everything. There's classes at school, there's everything. For us, there's nothing. There's gay porn. Mm-hmm. I mean, that kind of is it for so many. That's what they do. They turn to because that's the only outlet we have. And I think, I'm not saying the content that we've created is going to change all of this, but one, a tenet that was always important to us is that we present it to be as real as possible. We're sharing our relationship and the reality that we have, this type of sexuality, and we've always had a good online presence. We're always interacting with people, and so trying to have conversations around and offering support to all members of the community, how they look, no matter how they look or measure up. But I think that's what it is. Those individuals need to understand that we have this community and we're talking about these things.
Talking about it.
Because just like you said, that person heard this podcast and they didn't even know to think about these things.
Right.
We've talked about things before that I didn't even know to think about or to talk about. Right. It's true, and I mean, and so I think that it is the community and the conversations and knowing, especially for the younger gay people, knowing that. Yeah, of course there's pornography out there. Of course there's these OnlyFans channels out there, and they're all humongous dicks, and they're in Puerto Vallarta all the fucking time, or whatever. And that's great, but that's not, that's just a slice of it. It's a slice. We need to come to community and talk and meet and have these conversations and be vulnerable. And gay porn doesn't really prepare you for that, for sure.
I have friends on social media who they just never have their shirts on. And I will send them messages or post, did you need some money to buy a shirt? I mean, I like looking at them, and I'm also like, tell me you have some taste in clothing. I want to put something out that's going to maybe shift this a little bit, because we started out talking about Ruben's discussion around sex magic. And I had an opportunity 100 years ago to hang out with Harry Hayes. It was brief. And And I've heard a lot of stories about Harry and some of the work that he was doing, but he was an early civil rights leader he was a civil rights leader for gay issues back in the 50s when you just didn't do it.
Yeah, talk about it.
He started the Managing Society, and then in the 70s, I believe he was part of starting this radical fairy movement, which was um, encouraging safe sanctuary spaces for gay men to find their freak, if you will. And, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, I believe, came from them. And Harry did this workshop. I never participated in it. I had lots of friends. I had friends who did, who gave me bits and pieces of it around sex magic. And whenever I would hear about these sex magic workouts, my imagination was, like gay orgies and exploring sexuality. And yet what it sounds like what it really was this deconstructing of the stories that have gotten in the way of us really truly connecting with our sexuality and our sensuality as gay companions.
Yeah.
Right? In the sense of he used this I see if I can explain it. Mm-hmm. He said historically, and I think we still do this, that gay men tend to think of each other as object, right? Grindr. I see nothing but pictures, I see nice abs, and I pick and select out of the catalog. And what Harry wanted us to find as gay men was the ability to connect with each other, and he called it subject consciousness. That I would come to know you, your stories, the fabric and the process of who you are. Kind of like what we're doing it. This podcast, right? Yeah. Is what are the stories, what are the narratives that bring you to this space? And kind of moving away from the place of seeing you as object and really coming to see the full holistic, right? The body, mind, and spirit. Yeah. And they would, and it's interesting because how they would do this is through various stages of undress through the process, but they would basically get to a point where they would all be kind of with each other naked, old, young, etc., in this loving embrace. And what's interesting is having observed those circles from a distance, I know that people who were in those circles together 20 years ago were just really tightly connected. And I think that's even what motivated the idea of the retreats and the queer spirit movement, and then what we're doing right now with Mindfully Gay is, what happens in these circles, we build this altar, right? And we say, what represents gay? And how many of the guys bring some kind of phallic symbol, right? And so we talk about, right, the phallic, the penis, but it's interesting, it always seems like it's attached to a story of shame. And we're coming here to liberate that shame. Yeah. And so I sometimes think, I don't want to be hypercritical of porn because I enjoy porn as well. But I think it often positions us in this place of seeing each other as objects. Yeah. And I kind of have this weird fantasy, and I'm still kind of playing around with it. Like, what would it be like to create porn that accentuated tactics of sensuality and connectedness?
But so explain that though. How would you do that? How would you demonstrate that?
I'm going to be really honest. Right now, I'm in that place of fantasy. Like, I think I've kind of put out the idea with you, and I thought I'm looking forward to having that conversation with John as well, just because I don't know what it could look like. I just know that there's something that I've been in this business for 30 years, and I really don't know where to direct guys to have healthy conversations about the spirit-body connection. That, even some of our porn takes on narratives of, I'm just here to use you, which is fine. I think that can be a fun scenario, but sometimes that seems like the primary scenario.
Yeah, I've met some young dudes that I'm just whole. Like they just want to be a whole. Like they just.
An
It's.
object, yeah.
I one in particular that we did a couple scenes with, very hot guy, a friend. We've helped him out with some things, and I remember having sex with him, and he was the bottom in the scene, and he was sucking my dick. We were having oral sex, and I remember thinking, "Oh, you've got a nice dick. I'm going to suck his dick." And it was completely offensive to him. Like I even said, "What, you got nice junk? What are you talking about?" And he couldn't even. He shook his head and like couldn't even accept it, what I was saying, because of the program that was being run inside that inevitably came from exposure of that type of situation. Right. Where this dude's super. I mean, I don't save pictures of people that we work with normally. This is so bad to remember something like this, maybe, but like I've saved pictures of this kid. Like he's super hot. He does it for me, but the fact that I've said something like that to him and I'm just whole, I'm not at all. I don't want to have that type of interaction with someone. It's just not what I want to do. I liked complimenting him because it was a turn on to me, but it was just such a turn off to him that it just made me be like, well, I guess we're not speaking the same language. I don't know how to do this.
Right. Sounds like he wasn't able to receive that because he just, I don't know, perhaps just saw himself as that role in that position. And
so strictly, so rigid about his role, where he could be and what he could do.
I don't think this was an expectation I'm holding up to you, but I'm fantasizing about that scenario in more ways than one. But I'm wondering what it would have been like to say, "Wow, like can we talk about this?" Or even later, like, "I'm just so surprised at this response. Like you're this beautiful man," yeah, like I wonder what there's this part of me in hearing that story. I'm thinking, wow, what's the story?
Yeah.
That this person is so shut down about that part of their body.
And you're right. I mean, I know more of the backstory. Certainly, a rough relationship with family. I mean, parents are very disapproving. There's a lot of stuff that's perhaps the anchor for some things. But yeah, you're right. It would, I've. Even though today, I mean, I've known this person now for maybe 10-ish years. I don't think I could have that conversation with him like you're suggesting, and it would be, you know what? Because I know him well enough, I can't entertain it in my head because I just know it's not going to go anywhere. But I agree with you. Yeah, it would have been something different, something better, maybe. Hopefully, he could have seen himself in a more all of the gifts that he has type of thing, as opposed to limiting himself to that place.
Yeah. But I know you're talking about your particular friend, but I'm thinking, again, as a therapist in our community, I think that's epidemic. I think social media, I think the hookup apps, and I think I was telling you the other day, to me, the hookup apps are no different than what we used to do at the clubs.
Yeah.
The clubs were just, move, swipe left, swipe right, get out of my way. Right?
Yeah.
Right. And so I think in a lot of ways, the hookup apps have kind of replaced that mechanism in the club world. Maybe or maybe not, but it makes it more accessible. But I think that kind of mentality, like, people see themselves as whether they're worthy or not based on their sexual clout.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's, I was telling Bruce the other day, because he sees me somewhat obsessed about trying to move things along with Mindfully Gay, and I'm just like, it just feels like this vacuum that I know we've got the tools to offer something. These conversations, the Body Central workshops, I love those workshops, and I see something in a very short period of time. I think guys are kind of motivated to get on the table. I would love for us to have, I think at one point, I think I mentioned this to you, I would love to find a group of like 6 to 8 guys, that we could literally get together and talk and brainstorm and explore this, and then maybe document that through video. regular guys exploring the idea of their own sensuality. And when I think of sensuality, like, yeah, my body is pleasured, but in order for my body to like get to that place, I have to have trust.
Yeah.
Like I have to be with people that are gonna hold that space in a non-judgmental way. Um, and I feel like I'm going on forever saying a lot, but I there's a mechanism here. Like we know the ingredients, and the question in my mind is how do we pull it together and create an opportunity or a tool or a mechanism that, in my mind, could shift cultural ideas of self.
Absolutely. And you mentioned body sensual, and I really would like to talk about that a little bit, because it's something that we talked about and experimented with in some of our early days of Queer Spirit in our retreats. But in the recent years, I know I've been more drawn to this what we're calling body sensual, and I'll talk about what that is, and this sex magic and what that is. And it's really stemming from my background in yoga and understanding what yoga has done for me, and even just kind of this broader philosophy of yoga. Yoga, it comes from, it's tantric. And when we say tantra and tantric, one of the immediate associations is sex, tantric sex. But tantra is really about, expanding your consciousness, like we were talking about, this is the path that some people are on. That's all they know in regards to how to express their sexuality and how they learn about gay sex, maybe just through porn. And perhaps something tantric would be to expand that consciousness. And we're talking about that. How do we get to a place and finding those mechanisms to expand that consciousness? And the other part of tantra is to then feel liberated, to feel free, to remove those obstacles that have gotten in our way, to remove, or at least put way in the background, hopefully, those past stories and things that have limited us in our life journeys. And so with that perspective in mind, we have body sensual, and I've created these events around sensuality and tantra. And there's one event I call Tantric Circle, and I just had one recently, and it was quite beautiful because I do talk about, we start the conversation. I talk about tantric, or in tantra, just the way I just said it here, and and I use the image of like a boulder, a rock that's just sunk into the bottom of the ocean, that's immovable. And that's sometimes those feelings, those emotions that we're holding on to, backstories and trauma, whatever it is, just sits heavy in our bodies. How do we remove that? How do we begin that process when it feels just impossible? You talk about trust. Trust is a huge piece. And having opportunities to be a little vulnerable so I can maybe start to earn and gain trust, right? And trust in other people, and people can trust me. In the conversation, in these tantric circles, I ask people, and after I've shared, I ask, what's your boulder? What's your heaviness? What are you sitting with, or what's sitting in you that you would like to be free from, right? And these guys share. They talk about, maybe not in great detail, but they talk about their traumas, their backstories, or I'm just now coming out. I'm just now figuring out who I really am. And I like these circles, John, because I feel like I can freely express myself. And what happens is, in these sensual circles, we're naked. I talk openly and without shame about masturbation. We masturbate. We get off. We self-pleasure. This can be a beautiful thing, and it can be a very healing thing. It can be a very empowering thing. Expand your awareness around how your own sexual pleasuring, whether it's with yourself or with a partner or a group of people, can also be very empowering and liberating and healing. And that's what we get to explore and play with tonight in this circle. And what happens is, I think some think, oh, I'm just going to an orgy, right? They just label it as that. From a distance, it might look like that, but when you're in it, it's this beautiful sensual meaning these guys are embraced. They are holding each other. Their, heads are in laps, heads are on shoulders. They're just holding. Yes, there's stimulation as well, but in addition to that, there's just that connection. And it's so beautiful to watch. And you talk about the fantasy, and I don't think it has to be a fantasy, but it's, that's only a couple of hours, right? But to then take that experience and have a weekend or a week or whatever it is to have this opportunity to express yourself in this way, to have the conversations about it, to allow that boulder perhaps to crumble away and float away. That's my vision. That's my hope. That's my fantasy in this tantric work and this body sensual work and the sex magic of all this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of our discussion on sex, sexuality, and sensuality within the gay community. This conversation is just getting started. Tune in next week for the second half, where we'll continue to explore these complex themes with honesty and depth. Until then, take care and keep the conversation going.